Hey there, my name is Savannah Ledford, and today I'm going to talk about clay roots, the legacy of North Georgia's folk pottery families. Specifically, I'm going to focus on three families that have really established the foundation for folk pottery to have a strong foundation in history in North Georgia. And they are also intertwined together through their own heritage. In order to first understand the significance of the folk pottery families that I'm going to discuss, I'll have to talk a little bit about what folk pottery is. And folk pottery is defined in the works by folklorist John Burrison, who really is like the foundational historian when it comes to these folk pottery families and folk pottery in general, especially in the southern region. But folk pottery refers to ceramic wares made by hand or with minimal mechanization, often shaped and decorated according to traditional methods that are passed down through generations. In Southern and Appalachian culture, folk pottery served both practical and cultural purposes. They provided essential household containers for food storage and preservation, where a lot of times refrigeration and things like that were not available, while also reflecting local aesthetics, beliefs, and community identities. Burrison emphasizes that these pots and jugs and other things were not just tools, but expressions of regional heritage that tied these family workshops and rural lifeways together. North Georgia, in particular, the area around the town of Mossy Creek and later the community of Gillsville, became a hub for this craft due to a unique convergence of factors. And those factors include an abundance of high quality clay in the state of Georgia and proximity to transportation routes for these potters to get that clay. A lot of that clay is present in kind of that Piedmont middle region of Georgia. And the presence of skilled potter families that really took their skills, honed in on them, and made a name for themselves in the pottery world, especially the Metters family, which is one of those that I'm going to talk about. These practices preserved and advanced these traditional techniques over these past few decades. And as Burrison notes in his books, as you can see pictured below, all of which provide a variety and description of the history of folk pottery, whether it just be Southern folk culture in the first one, Brothers in Clay, Georgia very specifically, and then as well as in that last book, From Mud to Jug. These family lineages, combined with regional pride and growing interest from collectors and scholars in more recent times, have helped secure North Georgia's place as a vital center of American folk pottery. This project will also explore a brief heritage and legacy of the Metters, Ferguson, and Hull families. All of these potters are intertwined in the folk pottery legacy and family lineage of Northeast Georgia. And I chose to focus on these specifically because as we'll talk through the presentation, you'll see that a lot of them are intertwined through marriages as well, really establishing these three families as the dominant potters in this North Georgia area. First, I'm going to start off with the Metters family and talk a little bit about their heritage. The Metters pottery legacy began with a man named John Milton Metters, born 1850, deceased 1942, and he founded the very first Metters pottery business with his six sons in around 1892-93. Cheever Metters, the youngest son, the picture to the left, would continue this pottery business in the original location up until his death in 1967. Of his four sons, Quillen Lanier Metters, second left, the one seen holding the large churn, was the only one to continue the pottery legacy full time. Quillen, commonly referred to as Lanier, and the references that I'll show you of his pottery, he goes by Lanier, inherited the family business upon his father's death in 1967. And Lanier Metters would continue the family's legacy until his death in 1988. And also, just to give some more context of other people who did finally pick up the family pottery tradition kind of later on after a lot of the notoriety was brought to the Metters from Lanier, is Cheever Metters, Lanier, third, we have Edwin Metters, and then David Metters, who I personally knew growing up, who always had this bull mastiff by his side. And so these last two pictures are people that kind of picked up the pottery skills and later in life, but still are kind of influential in the pottery world, especially in the modern setting. So the Metters technique when it comes to pottery is something that really sets them apart and really is what built or helped other potters build up their techniques as well. And to the left, we can see Lanier Metters weighing clay on homemade scales that he had got. Excuse me, that is to the right. And then to the left, Lanier is using a treadle wheel, which was developed in 18th century England and uses a foot bar linked to a craft shaft that you can see down here at the bottom. And these kind of old school techniques were something that Lanier, as well as previous Metters and Metters after them, continued to use, kind of passing down those family legacies and traditions. And Lanier is quoted talking about digging for clay, that there's no clay that I ever found that would work by itself that came from a pond. You've got to go 2 or 3 more anyhow and get the clay from them and mix them all together so it'll work good. So that just shows you how much effort and thought went into creating these pottery items. They would go to multiple places to gather clay, mix those clays together in order to make the right consistency that they could then glaze and then put in the kilns. One thing that the Metters were also well known for, especially Lanier, were his glazes that he would mix together. And these were his own recipes, and a lot of potters now create their own glazes and they keep these recipes a secret. Lanier is quoted saying this about his glazes: "The best glazes goes on the churns. The churns are used for processing food. Best we ever use is that ash glaze. When you put it in on a churn and fire it, it'll just move a little bit when it's melted." And so Lanier was very I would say humble based on my research about his methods, but he also really had pride in creating the best wares for people to use. So one thing that all of these families did originally when they were creating pottery, they were creating items that were used for day-to-day purposes, like churns to churn milk to make butter, syrup jugs, whiskey jugs, just general houseware items for your southern folk that needed a method to save and preserve food. But over time, a lot of these potters would create items that were more so just to show off their artistic ability, as well as just be more so for fun. And one of those items are face jugs. And these face jugs are something that's not new to pottery, it's new to North Georgia, but Lanier Metters really took these face jugs and made a name for them and kind of put North Georgia pottery on the national spotlight because of his face jugs. And so I'm going to go through and talk about the 4 that are pictured here that really showcase Metter's artistic talent. And so to the far left, we have the Richard Nixon character jug from 1976. And it is said that Lanier was inspired by the television scandal with Richard Nixon. And this inspired him to make a variety of Richard Nixon face jugs. And this one is currently on display at the Folk Pottery Museum in Saltine Nacoochee. All of these actually are, so I got to see these in person, and it's really cool just to see the detail that went into these. The second to the left face jug is just titled Face Jug 1975. This face jug is a great example of Lanier really near the peak of his sculptural skills, and he really was able to humanize these face jugs. And if you look very closely, you can see detailed cheeks, chins, nose, lips, eyes that are squinting together. And this really highlights the expression of that face jug. And I just think that is a very good testament to his skill as a potter, just bringing these pieces of pottery to life. The third one is a wig stand from 1978. Lanier made a kind of small selection of these wig stands, and he was inspired actually by local teenagers that would take his face jugs and decorate them in their rooms by putting wigs and scarves and things like that on them. So he created these wig stands where he started off making them as if he were creating a jug, but modified them to be a wig stand. And this specific example actually has little holes in the ears for those teenagers to decorate them with earrings. So I think that's really neat and shows how Lanier used his artistic ability to really bring life and share that with his community by creating something that teenagers were interested in. And then the last one is just another example of Lanier being inspired by what he was seeing on the television to create. This is Idi Aman, a character jug, sorry, from 1979. He was inspired by the coverage of news, and this depicts the Uganda dictatorial president that he would frequently see. So it's really interesting to see how and what inspired Lanier. Some of it, like just the one titled Face Jug, was more so for his own artistic ability. And then the first and last one were things that he saw off the news. And then he was even creating items that local teenagers were kind of invested in, just showing the durability and the overarching kind of influence that he had, or that influenced his artwork, and then just the significance of them and over time and how they're still present for us to see. Also just shows the durability of these items. So continuing on with those face jugs, Lanier really played a pivotal role in preserving and revitalizing Southern folk art through that dedication to traditional pottery practices. So those techniques that we talked about, those skills, and passing those down to his family members and other people as well, really helped keep those traditional pottery practices alive. Um, and he really is kind of known as the most famous member of the Metters family, and he helped upheld a lineage of North Georgia potters while also adapting and refining the face jug from its signature style that really gained him national attention and brought attention to other folk potters in the era or in the area. Metter's work stood out as a living link to the 19th century folk pottery tradition, and it also inspired renewed interest in this Appalachian craft at a time when industrial goods really had largely started to replace these handmade wares. So now at this point in the late 70s, early 80s, a lot of Southerners were able to buy these kind of mass produced items to use in their kitchen. People had refrigerators. People didn't have to create their own milk and butter and things like that. So it really kept this tradition alive, even though we're seeing this shift into a more modern world. His influence extends beyond just his local community, as museums and collectors have began to recognize the cultural value of his pottery. And some of his pottery pieces, just basic searches online, are showing over $2,000 for a jug face or even a churn or a pitcher or things like that. Also in 1983, Metters received a National Heritage Fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts, affirming his role as a national treasure in the folk craftsmanship. His pieces were also acquired by major institutions, including the Smithsonian, which helped cement his legacy and ensured that Southern folk pottery would be preserved, not just as a functional craft, but also as a vital expression of American cultural heritage. And these three images down here are of face jugs that are on display in the Smithsonian Museum. And personally, having ties to the Metters, it really is moving to see someone in the Smithsonian with their artwork. It's just on a personal level, it gives you a sense of pride, and I hope that other people will see that their creations in the art field might leave a lasting legacy, and then also that these skills are continued to pass down through all of these families that I'll continue to mention. The second family that I'm going to talk about today is the Ferguson family of Georgia, and they entered the pottery trade in the mid 19th century, and they became one of the key dynasties in the region's rich folk pottery tradition. Their involvement began in the 1850s when William Billy Ferguson established a pottery operation in the Mossy Creek area of White County, which is about 20 miles or 20 minutes or so north of the Gillsville area, Claremont area, where the Metters family really had their home base. The Fergusons quickly became known for their durable, functional stoneware, especially their alkaline glazed jugs and churns. Over the generations, several family members took up the trade, helping to preserve and expand the family's influence, which is still present today. Notably, Ari Metters Ferguson, daughter-in-law of Billy Ferguson, was part of the lineage that connected the Fergusons to the renowned Metters family, another prominent name in North Georgia pottery. The Ferguson's family legacy lies in both their craftsmanship and their role in sustaining the folk pottery tradition in the face of these industrial changes that were being seen in the 1900s. And this contributed significantly to the cultural heritage of Southern Appalachia, as well as what the Metters family contributed. Charles Ferguson was Georgia's earliest known face jug maker, actually, and he is seen right here in the center. And this is one of his very first face jugs that he created, and it is currently listed for an auction price of over $2,000. So even though it was Lanier Metters that brought the face jug to its popularity and its notoriety in the area, it was actually Charles Ferguson that is known for making the first one in this area. So just like the Metters, the Ferguson family was originally known for producing very sturdy, durable, utilitarian stoneware, including churns, jugs, storage jugs, and syrup containers. These essential items were for rural life in the 19th and early 20th century Georgia, where, like I said before, families didn't have access to things like refrigeration, and so a lot of these were used to help preserve their foods. Their works also featured traditional alkaline glazes, often in earthy greens and browns, and displayed clean, functional forms with minimal decoration. And this distinguished their style from more elaborately decorated pieces produced by some other regional potters during the time. While the Fergusons shared glazing techniques and vessel forms with other North Georgia potters, their work was often noted for its consistency and quality craftsmanship. Unlike the later Metters family, who became famous for their whimsical face jugs, the Fergusons focused more on practical wares early on. However, their connection to the Metters through marriage helped bridge that utilitarian and artistic strands of Southern folk pottery, making the Ferguson legacy an essential foundation in the evolution of the craft in North Georgia. And now many members of the Ferguson family are known for making decorative wares, including chickens, face jugs, and other decorative styles. And so early on, the Ferguson family, just like the Metters family, created pottery really to help sustain the Southern way of life and also provide a means for them to make money for their family. And as things became more industrialized and those items weren't as popular, a lot of them did switch to these more artistic styles of pottery. And this is what you can see here. Originally in the center is an example of a pitcher that was commonly made by the Fergusons. This one is just in a blue glaze. And this example is listed for sale by a Ferguson, Bobby Ferguson, for $90 on his website. And they have numerous other household wares also that are still available. And to this far right, you have the Devil Monkey Form Face Jug by Stanley Ferguson. And this is just a good example of a decorative piece that they are now creating very commonly in their family. And then to the far left, we have a face jug that is created by Harold Ferguson. And so this just kind of shows the dynamics between what was offered with these types of housewares to what is now offered with their more decorative style pieces. And I would say with the Ferguson family, it is a strong mixture of all types. They have their usable housewares and they also have their more decorative pieces, whereas the Metters tend to now focus on the more decorative pieces. So even though the Ferguson family isn't as well known in regards to like a national standing as the Ferguson family, the Fergusons really played a crucial role in sustaining North Georgia's pottery traditions across generations. And they do this by passing down skills, techniques, and a strong sense of craftsmanship through family apprenticeships. And based off of my research and just looking at Facebook pictures and talking to members of the Fergusons, they really do hone in on teaching the craft to one another. Um, their continued practice and teaching of the skill has really helped preserve these traditional methods even more so than the Metters. They teach classes on wheel throwing, alkaline glazing, and they are even mass producing goods to make their items a lot more accessible. And by maintaining a focus on functional stoneware, the Fergusons contributed to the survival of folk pottery as a practical craft and a cultural expression. Their influence extended beyond their own lineage, helping to support regional networks of potters in the Mossy Creek area. Economically, the Fergans provide essential household wares to surrounding rural communities and support local markets by supplying durable goods that are both affordable and well made. So that's something that they have done throughout the years, is to hold these festivals where various potters can come in and sell their goods to the local public as a means to not only just show their decorative skills, but also help them financially with selling items that they have created. Culturally, they have helped define the distinct identity of Southern Appalachian pottery, contributing to a heritage that is now celebrated in museums, festivals, and educational programs that honor the region's artistic legacy. And currently at the Folk Pottery Museum in Saltina Coochie is the exhibit Clay and Kin featuring the Ferguson family. And the Ferguson family is not only tied to the Metters, but they're also tied to the Huell family, which I'll talk about next. But one thing when I went to the Clay and Kin exhibit that I found was a genealogy family tree that shows the connection between the Metters, the Fergusons, and the Huells. And so you can pause and look at that connection between all of them and just see how intertwined they are, but also see how their family is growing. And a lot of the younger generations are actually very heavily involved in pottery in some aspect, whether they are working for the Fergusons or the Huells at their still currently ran pottery shops, or if they are just making decorative pieces for their own like festivals. But one thing that I liked that Stanley Ferguson is quoted saying, he said, "I explained to my daughter that due to the family tree, she had Ferguson, Huell, and Craven bloodline flowing in her. So really all of the North Georgia potters are interconnected and just shows that connection that they have created with each other, not only through family, but really preserving this craft." And the last family that I'm going to talk about is the Huell family, and they have one of the most or the strongest enduring legacy in this folk pottery tradition in regards to creating a business that is very large scale. And as you can see in these pictures to the far left, we have some of the Huell family standing there together with some of their pieces with a very small kind of set up in the back. And then now this is a relatively current picture of their pottery operation where they have mainly pots and things like that for like floral decorations. They really have established a very large operation. But just to give you some background information, the Huel family has roots in the pottery business stretching back to the early 20th century in Banks County, which is about 10 miles to the east of where the Metters originated from. Their pottery operation began with E.L. Huel, who established a kiln in the 1920s and grew into a multi-generational enterprise that would become one of the largest remaining producers of traditional pottery in the Southeast. The family became especially known for their large-scale production of churns, flower pots, and face jugs, maintaining the use of local clay and time-honored techniques like wood-fired kilns and alkaline glazes. The Huels are connected to other major pottery families through both marriage and regional collaboration, forming part of a tightly knit network of North Georgia potters that include the Metters as well as the Fergusons. Their long-standing operation, Huel's Pottery, serves not only as a production site but as a living museum of Southern folk art, influencing younger generations of potters and drawing national attention to Georgia's pottery heritage. Their presence has had a significant cultural and economic impact, preserving traditional skills while also adapting to the changing markets and taste of the consumer. Late Harold Bull Huel spoke about the expectations of his father, Maryland Bud Huel. I think he had it in his mind he wanted all his boys to be potters. I have three brothers, and we've all kept our hands in the business. We must have been born with clay in our veins. And that is something that I discovered when I was researching these families, as they all are very prideful in being connected to one another, but also being connected to this pottery industry, even if they are not actively participating in it. They are very proud of their family lineage, and rightfully so. So Huel's family style and technique is characterized by its functional forms, durability construction, and traditional alkaline glazes, typically in shades of brown, green, and tan. The family specialized in utilitarian wares such as jugs, churns, crocks, and flower pots, often marked by clean lines and minimal decorations. And this is really a hallmark of North Georgia's folk pottery style. Over time, the Huels became especially known for their large terracotta planters, and if you drive by the Huel pottery location in Gillsville today, that's what I think of when I hear the Huel pottery family, is driving by and seeing all of those pots like in that first picture. And these terracotta planters became a commercial staple and helped sustain the business as household needs shifted away from those traditional stonewares. And throughout the 20th century, the family maintained wood-fired kilns while also incorporating more modern equipment to meet growing demands. In the late 20th and earliest 21st centuries, the Huels expanded their range to include decorative pieces like those face jugs that became popular, thanks to the linear Metters, embracing the artistic aspects of this folk pottery revival that we have kind of seen in the modern time. Despite modernization, they continue to use local clay and hand forming techniques, as you can see in these pictures. This is Chester Huel in his younger days, and a more recent picture of him creating those pottery items. And this really preserves the authenticity of their work. And you can look at a piece of pottery in comparison to other families and know that it is a Huel potter that created that item. The evolution of Huel pottery reflects both a commitment to heritage and an ability to adapt, ensuring that family's relevance in a changing cultural and economic landscape. Chester Huell, as seen, is now really seen as the family patriarch, and he stated while reflecting on the pottery business that the pottery business has always been hard work, but the new potters to work making put the new potters to work making balls, forming clay and firing with wood, and you will see who will stay in the pottery business. It is a big job to get enough wood to fire the kiln each week, have enough clay to use, and make enough pottery to fire. The new pottery thinks that whether they have made pottery for 2 weeks, 2 years, or 20 years, they know it all. But in the pottery making business, you will learn new things each day. And that is one thing that the Huells are known is for being very open and willing to teach younger generations, whether it be Huells or not, the skill of creating pottery. And the legacy of the Huell family really is evident in their continued operation of traditional pottery kilns and their role as stewards of the craft. Huell's pottery has remained active into the 21st century and one of the few family-run operations still producing pottery on such a significant scale using traditional methods. Their commitment to maintaining working kilns, particularly their large wood-fired groundhog kiln, has helped preserve the physical and cultural infrastructure of folk pottery in Georgia. The Huells have also embraced their role in promoting education and tourism, welcoming visitors to their pottery site in Gillsville, Georgia. They also participate in events like the annual Folk Pottery Show in Salty Nacoochee, and they also host a lot of their own pottery shows in the area. And then through demonstrations, public workshops, and collaborations with institutions like the Folk Pottery Museum of Northeast Georgia, the family has contributed to the broader understanding and appreciation of this regional art form. Their visibility and dedication have made them really cultural ambassadors for North Georgia's pottery, ensuring its survival not just as a craft, but as a living tradition woven into the region's identity. The Pottery Studio right here is courtesy of Kurt Huell. So these are large planters that they're making. And then this face jug to the left was created by William Huell in 1910. And these are just some examples. So the Ferguson, Huells, and Metters families really share a deep-rooted commitment to tradition, particularly in their use of handmade processes and passing those skills down from generation to generation. Across generations, these families preserved core techniques such as wheel throwing, wood fire and kiln use, and alkaline glazing, ensuring that folk pottery remained a living craft rather than a forgotten art. While united by shared methods and values, each family made distinct contributions to the regional tradition. The Fergusons were known for their consistency and connection to the later Metters artistry. The Huells became commercial leaders, adapting traditional forms for broader markets, and the Metters family, especially Lanier Metters, brought national attention to face jugs as a form of Southern folk art. Collectively, these families shaped the cultural identity of North Georgia, turning everyday utility into enduring heritage. Today, through museums, festivals, and educational efforts, their legacy continues to inspire a renewed appreciation for folk pottery, celebrating it as both an artistic tradition and a vital part of Southern history. And here you can see in the top left corner is Lanier Metters with his face jugs that he is waiting to put in the kiln. The bottom left, these are churns and jugs from various members of the Metters family. And then in the top right are various items from members of the Huell family. And then in the center, we have the face jug with hat by Bobby Ferguson. So you can see just how different their craftsmanship is when it comes to those utilitarian wares that really gave the foundation to all three of these families, and then their more decorative art pieces that they continue to make to this day.